Robert Fisk is the Middle East correspondent with The Independent. He joins us with more on this somber anniversary. Mr. Fisk, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
I know you are here to mark the anniversary of the genocide. Beirut is your home. So why, of all places in the world, would you come to Toronto for this day?
Because there are a lot of Armenians in Toronto. I actually do speak to Armenians in Beirut and also in the United States, because I think, having done a lot of work as a reporter on the genocide, and it wasn't, by the way, what you call it deadly massacres, it was a genocide, not just because we have photographic evidence, film evidence, we have the documents of diplomats at the time. We even know that after the First World War, the Turks themselves put the war criminals of the genocide on trial, although later on we had to all pretend that didn't happen. I think the fact is that just as we can never deny the Jewish Holocaust, we can't deny and must not deny the first Holocaust of the last century, which was the Armenian Holocaust. My newspaper, by the way, says Armenian Holocaust with a capital H. It was. Historically, it is a fact.
So why won't Turkey recognize it then? 20 other countries around the world do.
Well, I think there's two reasons, basically. The first is that they're frightened of reparations, that the Turks, or the Turkish government, which is a successor, of course, to the Ottoman Turkish authorities, would end up having to pay out billions of dollars in reparations to the descendants of those who were so cruelly murdered in what we would today describe not only as a genocide, but as war crimes. The second reason, which is a much more difficult one for the Turks to accept, is that although Turkey accepts, and most people accept, and I would accept, that a new Turkish state came into existence under Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, it is unfortunately a fact that some of those supporters of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk that brought about the new Turkish state were actually involved in the genocide. So it seems, in a historical point of view, perhaps to contaminate the roots of the Turkish secular state that we have today. I think the Turks are brave enough, and should be brave enough, to say, look, it happened, it wasn't our regime, but it happened here, our grandfathers were involved, just as Germans will tell you, yes, our grandfathers were criminals and did terrible things to the Jews, and the Holocaust was a German responsibility, even though the present German government has nothing to do with the Nazis.
Will Turkey ever recognize it as a genocide, do you think?
I think it will. You know, I go to Turkey a lot, and among educated Turks, university-educated Turks, there's a growing understanding and knowledge that the Armenian genocide did happen. More and more Turks are discovering they have Armenian grandmothers or Armenian grandparents, because what happened was that many Turks were brave enough to resist the authorities of the time and save the Armenians from the genocide of the Ottoman Turkish regime. Men who should be honoured, by the way. Of course, Turkey can't do that because it doesn't acknowledge there was a genocide. But I think not just this, but academics in Turkey, and particularly a very brave one in the United States called Tana Akçam, have come out with documentary evidence proving beyond a shadow of doubt from Turkish Ottoman documents that this was a deliberate, industrialized attempt to destroy a Christian people. In other words, it was a genocide.
All right, you say Christian, and that was going to be my next question, because for those who aren't familiar with the history, why was there this mass organized taking out of the population?
Because what had happened from the previous century under what were called the Young Turks regime, and we don't have a time to go through that, in the Young Turks Revolution, was an increasing desire to Turkify, and by extension, I suppose, make more Muslim, the Turkish part of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire itself was mainly Muslim, of course. There were many different Christian races. But the Armenians were a very large, not only a very large population in Ottoman Turkey, or what they would have called Western Armenia. More than that, they were a very wealthy population. And I think also at that time, and of course Turkey it was a terrible mistake to join the First World War on the German side. They were losing the war. They were using up huge amounts of money. Gallipoli, which the Turks won, was extremely damaging for them, and it cost a lot of money. There were Turkish refugees everywhere. Take it out on the Armenians, just as Hitler said after the First World War, we were stabbed in the back by the Jews, take it out on the Jews. There's a lot of parallels between the Turkish Ottoman regime and the Nazi regime, and one of the chilling things about it is that we've discovered that some of the Germans who witnessed the Armenian genocide, because they were training the Turkish soldiers at the time, later went on, 20 years later, they joined the Wehrmacht and killed Jews in places like Ukraine and Belarus. They became personal criminal participants in the Jewish Holocaust.
Robert Fisk, I wish we had more time. So glad to talk to you. It was a real pleasure, and I'm glad that you're able to enjoy at least a little bit of your visit here to Toronto and to Canada.
Sitting in your studio. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.